Get started, guys. Before we start the lecture, I want to introduce Allison Hind, who's the Fellowships Director of the Public Service Center. And why she's here is that the Public Service Center sponsors fellowships for IAP in the summer, where students can go abroad or work in the US to do public service focused projects, right? Very much in the vein of this class. So this is one of the options potentially for you guys to continue on your work if you want to during IAP and travel to go see your partners and work with them, etc. So why don't you talk about the fellowships a little bit?
I'm also going to introduce Greg, who's my grad assistant, who if you come in with questions or whatever at some point in time, Greg's also going to be getting back to you and doing proposals and so forth. So as Amos says, I run the fellowships internship at the Public Service Center. It's kind of fun coming in here and seeing all these, because there must have been at least 7 fellowships probably.
Probably more.
Along the way. It's been a project we've done a lot of support for. What we do for fellowships is essentially support students who are doing significant project-based service projects around the world. They often come out of classes or in some other way out of research or academics, although if you've got some just private passion, obsession that you're working on that has a service focus, you can also bring those in. They don't have to be tied to your classes. And we typically support students over IAP or over the summer, although if you have something you're working on at MIT, either for a local partner or something you can do from a distance, rather for a more distant partner, we can also do that, but the main thing is IAP in the summer. And typically, especially if you're working away from campus, what that means in terms of support is funding to enable you to get where you need to be, so plane tickets, trains, whatever it might be, to get around once you get there, so you can actually move about and go visit people you need to visit, accommodation and food. So the core isn't sort of materials or prototyping parts, although sometimes we can help out with those things, but that's not something you should rely on us for. But what you can rely on us for if you're applying it selected is that sort of getting where you need to be and able to live there and not starve kind of funding. The deadline to apply this IAP is October 17th at noon, so it's about mid-semester. But you can also take projects you start in this class or from other places into our summer session, and the deadline for that is typically the Friday before spring break. It's usually about March 18th. So thinking summer's a more realistic prospect for you, that's further away. Are you all graduate students in the class? Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that time away is a type of proposition often for graduate students, and if you go on our website, it's going to say, for IEP, there's a 3-week minimum. For the summer, I think I say 6-week minimum. That's my preferred minimum, but that's really more a hard and fast rule for undergraduates. For grad students, because I know you have different ties to your time. If you've got a project you want to propose and you know you can't meet that minimum, just send me an email and ask me whether or not it sounds doable. The fact that you're in a class with connections that might already be established, for instance, makes a difference in how I would think about that. So just always ask if you've got any doubts about it. We've supported a lot of projects coming out of classes like this where there's kind of a prototyping element involved. You've got an idea, you started building something, you think it's going to work, you need to go out and field test it or get input from the market that you're maybe designing for. So that's definitely something we do. However, it comes with its own sort of complications. So if you're saying, I'm working on this prototype in class, and so now I'm going to go and take it to Kenya over IAP, and we're going to put it out there. When you're applying on October 17th, you don't really know whether or not your prototype works, right? It could turn out to be a terrible idea by the end of the semester. Again, that's fine. We just ask that when you're putting in a proposal, you say, this is where I'm at with this project. This is how I'm planning on thinking about it for the rest of the semester. If it doesn't work out, these are other ways that I could be useful with this project in the field. Because maybe if this prototype doesn't work out, what you really need to do is go and get more input from people in the field for the next iteration of it or whatever. So just map it out. If you know that you're not 100% sure that the project's the right one at this moment, tell us that. It's really the sort of proposal where the more you can tell us and enable us to get those questions answered, the better it is, rather than like a business plan competition where you have to pretend that it's perfect. It's not that perfect. Because nothing is perfect in this world, especially in service. I think those are the key things. The other thing is just, do you talk a little about the Ideas Global Challenge?
I haven't. No, you should mention that.
We also run the Ideas Global Challenge, and if I were better prepared, I would be thinking what the deadline is coming up. We have one coming up, and you can find it on our website. The Ideas Global Challenge was also, I think, maybe the first funder of the LFC, is that right?
One of the first, yeah. It wasn't called that.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's the Ideas Competition.
It was like wheelchair competition.
You'll see, yeah, in this presentation, you'll see what we applied with. It's pretty rudimentary. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, and renderings. But the prototype is.
Oh, MIT.edu/MITPS. So the Ideas Global Challenge is it's a service competition, but sorry, it's an entrepreneurship and innovation competition, I should say, where all the projects have a service focus. So if you're building a new gizmo, or you have a new system to support something, or a new way of doing distribution networks, or any of those sorts of things, where there's a challenge and it's been addressed, no one's cracked it, and you've got a new idea about maybe how you could crack that challenge. It doesn't have to be a technology. You can enter the Ideas Global Challenge. There are, I think this year, 3 different opportunities during the year to put in what we call sort of a scope statement, which is a very short initial proposal, which is an opportunity to get feedback from a group of reviewers on the project, but also an opportunity to ask for some sort of prototyping funding, or some, if maybe you need to print things or do communications or something along those lines, you can get some sort of relatively small funding along the way during the course of the year. And then come next spring, put in a full proposal, which is a larger sort of 10-page proposal, speaking about the innovation, speaking about the community impact. And you can win up to $10,000 from a single prize, although you may find that you qualify for more than one award from the competition and could actually win more than $10,000. So it's a great support network as well as an eventual funding source, because along the way you get great feedback from reviewers, and also that possibility of potentially getting funded 4 times in the course of the year if you keep submitting those scope statements to get more feedback and to get more input on the prototyping. So check it out on the website. It's got those dates. There's an upcoming, I think, in September, scope statement deadline, maybe early October, this kind of month, so check that out. And those are probably the things that are most relevant to you guys from us, but you can also at any time just email if you have questions. My name is Alison Hind. My email is hynd@mit.edu. Obviously, Amos wants you to email about things in this class, and go up things, bring them in also, we can help you figure those out. Anything I'm missing?
You know, just as far as timing with your projects, I think, when's the deadline for IEP? It's
October 17th.
Yeah, that's right around the time of our strategy presentations. So at that point, you're going to have a really good sense of like the direction the project's going in, and what you're trying to accomplish, which I think could form the good basis of a proposal.
Yeah. And we encourage you, we don't want you to sort of put a proposal in and then forget about it until January 4th when you're getting on a plane. So if you submit it on October 17th, and then during the course of the sort of the review and interview process for the program, you've got further along. You can just send that information in. I'll bring it along to the interview and say, look, this is where I am now. We sort of consider everything up until the point where we make the final decision to be part of that proposal. So it's pretty flexible. Yeah.
Is this something that you apply for individually, uniquely, or can you apply as a group or partial group?
You can apply with more than one person to work in a group, and that's fine. Actually, really encourage people to do that. But the decisions are made on an individual basis. So we might select 1 or 2 people out of a group of 3. But definitely, we love having people working as groups. It's just you need to each submit an individual thing. Obviously, part of it, the community needs section and so forth, you can share amongst you, but the sort of sections on your own motivation and qualifications and role and stuff being unique. And we often fund multiple people.
Cool. In addition to these, this class has a budget for up to 6 of you to travel internationally as well during IEP. So, as we go through the semester and you're interested in doing that, definitely talk with me about it.
And often what happens with team things actually is that people will find funding from different sources.
Yeah.
And go as a team, so that's a good way of spreading the love.
Cool.
Great.
All right, thanks.
So, yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope to see some applications. Thank you.
Cool. All right. I'm going to move this table so we can throw some wheelchairs on top of it. John, you're probably going to have some tires in your face. No, that's cool. I'd take a tire in the face. I've gotten a tire in the face plenty of times. I've traveled on many, many aircraft with these wheelchairs. Okay, yeah, because I want you in the back to be able to see this. So I like this lecture because this is a product that I think is very much in the same vein as what we talk about in the class, right? This convergence of technical and socioeconomic. And I know this product really intimately because I designed it, right? And I've been part of this for now, like, God, we won the Ideas Global Challenge in, I think, 2008, right? So 6 years plus, you know, 6.5 years. So it's been a long time. And these are all iterations of the chair that I'm going to talk about. And there was a lot learned from each of these. But it's pretty cool that we have them and you can see them, you know, in the flesh. So yeah, this product's called the Leverage Freedom Chair, and it goes by LFC, the acronym for short. So I had you read a couple papers about this, and I'm sorry, I thought I had them on the website like earlier than yesterday. So I understand if some of you may not have seen them. The biomechanics one was already up there from the first week of the class. And I gave that to you because I think that paper is very much in the scope of what you should produce in this class within one semester. And that whole paper was written on that first chair. That's like a really kind of quick and dirty, crappy prototype with a plastic seat and a, you know, really quickly welded frame. But we were able to test it and get some data out of it. And then the other paper was about the design process and how we design this thing. So do people have thoughts about that? And we're going to talk about it some more, but what were people's thoughts? Yeah.
So one question I had is, so you went to different countries, right?
Yeah.
Did you go back to, I think it was Africa your first test? Did you go back to Africa with your operation to see if it was actually better than what you originally started out with?
You know, not yet, to be honest, and we want to. It's just a matter of it hasn't happened. We haven't shipped chairs yet. No, so the blue one was the one that was tested in Africa, and this one is pretty close to what's produced now in India. We had to cobble together a backrest for this, by the way. We've cannibalized all our backrests here, prototyping a next-gen chair. But anyway, if you want to ride it, you can get a sense. But no, we're now, you know, I guess starting to branch out to a bunch of other countries. We make them in India, but in the last year we've shipped to Haiti and Nepal and Easter Island and Guinea. So we're kind of working back, and the plan is certainly to get back with them.
Was the progression of countries an intentional step to touch all the customers, or was it driven by trying to find a sponsor and manufacturer and all that?
Exactly. It was driven by, initially I spent a lot of time in East Africa when I started working on wheelchairs. And so I made some connections there, and that was a logical partner to work with. And then the Inter-American Development Bank had a $50,000 prize for assistive devices, but you had to work on it in Latin America. So that's why we went to Guatemala. And then we ended up going to India because India has the biggest disability group in the world. Yeah. Yeah.
And definitely in the software world, there's all this kind of like, you should just open it and be able to use it. It's clearly not true with all kinds of hardware, but can you talk a little bit about that hurdle?
Yeah, oh yeah, that was a big hurdle. So the analogy I like making is, imagine if you've never seen a bicycle before, and someone ships it to you and you put it together and you get on it and you immediately fall off and like crack your head open, right? You'd be like, oh my God, this thing's terrible. You know, it's super dangerous. I'm never going to use it. And we had a similar situation potentially with these, because if you crank really hard on the levers, you can flip right over backwards. And that happened to us a few times, and people were like, whoa, I don't know about this thing. You know, and you can do the same with a regular wheelchair, but they've seen more regular wheelchairs. And so we kind of learned that the hard way, and in the last trial, we did educate people, and it made a huge difference. Yeah.
So moving forward, when you're actually shipping these, is it, you know, you're gonna have a paper copy with pictures, or someone gonna
We have that.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a pictorial training kit and a DVD training kit, and yeah, we in a number of the provisions we've done now, we've gone and trained people, but we're quickly getting, you know, to the scale where we can't do that. So we're definitely developing those materials.
Does that paper training guide actually mitigate those risks? Are people reading them and using them? Because you know, when you throw in a piece of paper, sometimes people don't read it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if we have distributed some without any, like without somebody there who knows how to use it well, and I'm not sure. No, we have, because we shipped to Nepal, and none of us have gone there. So to my knowledge, it's been okay. Yeah, with Nepal and Easter Island, actually. We haven't been to either of those places. Yeah, I know, right? And we don't have any pictures of the chair next to the big heads on Easter Island. We have the big heads and we have the chair, but not together. No, so I think from my understanding is it's okay so far. You know, people are learning it. Yeah, Andrew.
So I saw one of the papers, there was a mention of like an anti-tipping over device.
Yeah.
Has that really progressed into
That's a really good point. And yeah, depending on the culture, yes. So what was funny is in a place like Haiti, people would jump in the chair, they'd cruise around, they were kind of daring, you know, and the chair's designed so you can pop the front wheel ups to get over obstacles. And when you're using it like a regular wheelchair, grabbing the hand rims, you want to do that. You want to be able to wheelie. So it's a good feature. So in Haiti, no problem, no anti-tip required. But in India, people tend to be a lot more conservative. And they want to be very stable. They don't want to tip over. And so that is where we started making the anti-tip bar and offering it as an option. So it's really country dependent.
How does that work?
As we're, you know, so I don't actually know if we shipped any anti-tip bars with the last order in India. I think what we're doing, so you're running into my lack of knowledge about how the company works, because I'm in an advisory role with a company that now sells these things. But I think what we've done is shipped some anti-tip bars when we've had an order of, we had a couple hundred, you know, recently in India. And so not with every chair, but some. And we do the same with like spare parts. Yeah.
I saw in the paper that there was some input about putting some storage area underneath, and at least the way the paper was written, it sounded like, so we're going to throw that on there. How strict is the company on configuration management and testing that, and, you know, to guard against the risk of doing something that looks simple but then has an unintended consequence on the design?
Yeah, we've done a number of follow-ups, not to the same degree as what you read about, but gone back to Haiti, gone back to India, talked with people to see if there's big issues. This one has that backpack that was added after that field trial. So, you know, as far as I know, it's adequate. We haven't changed it. We haven't gotten feedback enough to change it. So, yeah, that's where it is. Like, oh, no, I don't think so. The backpack's pretty tiny, and it doesn't, you know, the amount of weight you put in here. Yeah, if you fill it full of lead, you know, bars, it would shift your CG back, and that could be an issue. But no, I don't think that would warrant another whole round of testing. Like, doing the field trials is a huge investment in time and money, and so, you know, I guess we've kind of mitigated that issue a little bit by providing a small backpack, but yeah, sure.
Two questions. How much time and money did you spend on the field trials?
We did a lot of them when I was a grad student and postdoc, so that paid for a lot of like personnel costs. And we, as Allison said, we certainly milked the Public Service Center a lot and had a number of fellowships through them. And we got grants from the Inter-American Development Bank for Guatemala. We got money from the NCIIA, which is part of the Lemelson Foundation, the National Collegiate Innovators and Inventors Alliance. So, you know, all in with all those fellowship funds and everything, it was a couple $100,000 to get to the point of having a pretty good prototype of this. And then to move to production, it was another couple $100,000. Our manufacturing partner paid for all the tooling costs. We have gotten some investment from Ratan Tata, actually. We won Mass Challenge, which is the biggest startup competition in the country. So that was $100K plus free office space for a year. So it's been kind of a mix and match, and now we're starting to get some revenue from the chairs, but it hasn't been millions. Like, you know, we've actually intentionally tried to stay lean and not give up our equity in the company and just kind of scrape by. So, like, you know, any of my contributions to the company right now, I haven't been paid for, but I own roughly a third of it, right? So my financial benefit will come, you know, if and when we turn a profit. And I think that's been a good strategy. Yeah.
The other question was, the paper I read about how you had to design it to be smaller and the rods had to be more.
Yeah.
That got me thinking, like, don't people have an issue with driving a chair off-road and then taking it inside the house, like cleanliness kind of a thing?
You know, we haven't seen that. You have that with any type of wheelchair. And I think what they do is just wipe it off. Yeah. Or, you know, if they live in a super small house, they would crawl on the ground still if it doesn't fit. But no, in the households where we've tested it, that hasn't been a criticism. Monica, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I noticed that in the paper where you like surveyed them about how good the chair was from 1 to 5 in different terrains, like I imagine like that was a pretty easy way to survey people, but I imagine that lots of things get lost in translation. So did you ever find that you wanted to ask them like, how sturdy do you think this is, or how durable do you think this is, but you thought it might get lost?
We did a lot of more like open-ended questions at the end of those surveys to get at those issues that you're talking about. Because like things would come out in conversation that maybe weren't touched on explicitly with a question. Also with those surveys, we had trouble using a standard Likert scale of saying, okay, relate this emotion to a number 1, relate this emotion to a number 2. Like people are like, what are you talking about, numbers and feelings? And so, you know, we ended up being like very bad, bad, good, very good, and you know, like, or normal, very good, good, or you know, in that scale, and that's how we got, you know, numbers out of it. But that's something we run into, you know, in our group all the time, that Likert scales don't work perfectly. Yeah?
Similarly, you sort of mentioned a couple times that, well, they stopped giving us feedback, so we get it done, which is kind of an interesting.
No, that's oversimplified, yeah. I guess the degree of issues reduced over time. And you know, and I'm going to take you through the chronology of the design. You're going to see like there's some big, like, oh my God, this would kill the project type issues. And we got fewer and fewer of those as time went on. And so I don't think any of the issues ever gone, but we were confident enough that people were, you know, saying like, hey, this works pretty well. We've adopted it as our primary mobility aid, all this good stuff, that we could move into production. But you know, we certainly still are trying to improve it. All right, I should start because this is a pretty long lecture. Cool. So this is what the chair looks like in action. And this is the type of environment that it was designed for. This was taken during our last field trial in a rural village. And you read about that the trick behind the design is that if you want to go fast, you can grab down near the pivots of the levers. And as the going gets tougher, you can slide your hands up the levers, which gives you a longer lever length, and you can produce more torque in the drivetrain. So with that mechanical system of just sliding your hands up and down the levers, our chair is about 80% faster than a regular wheelchair. It's about 40% more efficient, and you can produce about 50% more torque at the wheel. So it effectively gives you a much higher and much lower gear than you could get with a regular wheelchair. All the moving parts on the LFC are made from bicycle parts, and I'll talk a bit more about this later too. But we looked around the world to find the most common bike parts that you could even get in a village in a rural area, and so that makes the chair repairable basically anywhere with local technicians and local knowledge, local tools. This is what the chair looks like when you go indoors. You can take the levers out, they pop right out and go in the sides, and so this converts it into a regular push-run propelled wheelchair. And we had to, you know, as one of you mentioned, and we'll talk about more, we had to size it so it was small enough to fit through a doorway or low enough to get under a table and be compact and maneuverable enough to get into a small room like a bathroom. So you could get up close to the toilet and actually transfer off. And all the people in these videos that you've seen are full-time wheelchair users. This guy has a spinal cord injury, so he's paralyzed from the chest down. So where the project started was I spent in 2005 on a Public Service Center fellowship. I spent the summer in Tanzania working with Whirlwind Wheelchair International, which is a wheelchair organization based in San Francisco that's for almost 40 years has been designing wheelchairs for developing countries. And a program in Tanzania that trains people how to make wheelchairs and start their own workshops. And so both of those organizations wanted to know how well products were doing in Tanzania. Like how well were they meeting people's needs? You know, what were the different products like? So I spent a summer interviewing about 100 people, wheelchair users, disability groups, wheelchair builders, trying to get a sense of how well those products worked. And what stood out after that study, and then what really came out when you look globally, and I visited like other countries, was there's a huge need for wheelchairs in the developing world, as you probably would guess. This number now is closer to 40 to 60 million. I've even seen estimates up to 60 million. But tens of millions of people who need a wheelchair but don't have one, and the majority of them live in rural areas. And the issue, though, with that is that in developing countries, the type of products you'd find typically are either a push-rim propelled wheelchair or a hand-powered tricycle, which you pedal like a bike, but with your hands. And the issues with these is that, you know, this works great indoors, but it's really arduous to propel long distances. And this is great on flat ground, but they're usually only geared with one gear. So they're not great at climbing hills or like going through like sand or mud. And it's too big to use indoors. Right? So if you want to use something in the house, you're out of luck, unless you can use crutches. Like this guy's a polio survivor and he has crutches in the back there. So he could go short distances on crutches. But if you have a spinal injury and you have no control of your lower body or no sensation, forget it. You're like literally crawling on the ground. So this kind of set the stage for why there was potentially a new product opportunity for rural areas that could go both fast and efficiently on rough terrain, but also be small enough to use indoors. And so we did, you know, prior art searches and looked at other products on the market that, you know, maybe could be adapted into this new market space of developing countries. And there's a number of like really good, capable off-road wheelchairs that you can buy. This is the Renegade wheelchair, and it's also lever powered. And this is called the one-off hand cycle, and you lay in a prone position and pedal with your pedals out front of you. The issue with these products is that they're minimum $4,500, and some of them now are upwards of $7,500 or above, right? And the global price point for like appropriate developing world wheelchairs is anywhere from like $150 to $300, right? Order of magnitude off. Yeah.
What is it about them that makes them so expensive?
I think part of it is development costs and paying like a US guy's salary. Part of it is low production. Part of it is the markup that you can get away with in these countries. Yeah, part of it is component costs. You know, if you're using like nicer high-end bike parts, whereas we use like the cheapest bike parts you can possibly get. Yeah, so it's a number of those factors. Part of it's insurance, actually. You know, these guys are going to have to pay insurance if they're selling in the US, where, you know, you don't necessarily have to in developing countries. So all that stacks up. And I'll talk a little bit about that actually in the price difference between these two guys. Yeah?
Are there different certification bodies that you have to use for sort of a US sale versus an EU sale that might also contribute to that?
It depends on how you want to sell it. We're actually not going to go for FDA approval with this chair. This is the US version, which I'll tell you more about in a bit, because it's kind of a logistical nightmare. It's expensive, and you have to maintain your FDA certification. And so we think we can offer a cheaper chair and sell it more easily by offering it as a sports product, right, direct to consumers. In India, no to sell them. But if you want government reimbursement, yes, it has to pass the Indian Bureau standards, and that's something we will have to go through eventually. We haven't yet. Yeah?
Can you go into a little more detail? How does it limit distribution in the US and not have to be FDA?
How does it limit?
Yeah, what are the downsides of not doing FDA?
I guess, you know, if we could somehow have like these prescribed to people, you know, that would be great. That could increase the market. But this is, in the US, is probably going to be a secondary recreational product. So the justification for that is not the same as like an everyday wheelchair. And one of our potential big markets in the US is the VA, right? Because there's a lot of like active veterans. And FDA approval doesn't matter. You know, if it's a recreational device that improves veterans' lives, then the VA will buy it anyway. Yeah, Andrew?
So I have two questions. First, did you have any like problems with like intellectual property with that lever arm wheelchair?
No. There's a number of lever wheelchairs that have been patented, and we just had a patent approved for a number of elements on the chair, but no is the short answer.
Okay, and then, so in the US, are you marketing around the same price range and as like the developing countries? And is that sort of like, do you take into effect how like, do American consumers want a more expensive wheelchair because they feel like they're getting more value from it?
There's a longer answer to that later in the presentation. But yeah, this is a lot more expensive for a number of reasons. Yeah, and somebody in the back had a question?
Yeah, I raised the same question as the first one because a lot of times there are existing products that would work really
Yeah.
And then how do you go about like garnering intellectual property? Do you really need to find some sort of a technological difference in order to make that patentable? Because cost is patentable.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you may have to innovate, right? And if you have to innovate, you might generate new IP, right? Which is certainly the case for us. If you can easily adapt something, you could always sell it as a knockoff and not pay intellectual property. Like, it's terrible to say, but it happens all the time, right? We actually don't have any patents on this internationally or in India where we make it, because the only way we can protect the IP is to sell at the lowest price in the highest quality, because we could never really defend any IP. So I don't know, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for that. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about like why I think a lot of times in these markets they require such a high level of innovation at such a low cost that you're going to create a new solution anyway. So, all right, let's keep moving on. So when I started looking at the wheelchair market, the types of products that you would find around the world can kind of be broken up into three different categories. Wheelchairs that were designed abroad by Westerners but made at high volumes in China. Wheelchairs that were designed by Westerners but made locally, say in an African workshop or a Guatemalan workshop. And then devices that were designed locally and also made locally. And what was interesting when I looked at this is that you look at all these Western solutions and they're all based on a regular wheelchair, right? They're just an adaptation of basically this is what you'd see in a hospital. This is like a cheap version of a hospital chair. But they all use a push rim style of propulsion, the same setup. They're not really a different product. And what was interesting is when you look at what local innovators created for the same market, they're very different. These are all variants of hand cycles. So this one you kind of row back and forth to propel yourself. This one is a regular hand cycle where the pedals are out front. And this is an Indian version where the pedals are kind of back near the seat and you have a tiller to steer the front wheel. So you pedal with one arm and steer with the other and kind of switch on and off. But what's interesting about this is like these products are so different between what Westerners had designed and what locals had designed. It seems like there might have been this like needs perception difference. And so that kind of clued me into maybe there's an opportunity for innovation here. And then finding the first patents on wheelchairs, not much has changed in the last 140 or so years. And so I think this again was an indicator like there was room for innovation in the wheelchair space. So doing this background research, looking around the world, we came up with the core requirements of what a new device should entail. And so we wanted to make a single mobility aid that could both go fast and efficiently on rough terrains and be small enough to use indoors, be repairable even out in a village setting like this. So we had to think about like what could you use to repair this chair? Because inevitably it was going to break down. I don't think we could make like a bomb-proof device that would last 10 years. 10 years is about the target you'd want a wheelchair to last. So we knew it had to be serviced. And we knew the global price points for developing world wheelchairs. So we could set a target of about $200. So that's where the project started. And I was sitting at a conference one day and I was just like thinking about like how could we get a wide range of mechanical advantage with a very simple mechanical system. And it's not like it was just like one aha moment. There was about a year and a half leading up to that. We were racking our brains of like how to get a wide range of mechanical advantage with an appropriate system. And so we took apart bicycle drivetrains and internal gear hubs and tried all these different things like 4-bar linkage drivetrains. And it dawned on me one day that we could just have a fixed length lever but simply just change the hand position on the lever in order to change the torque and velocity of the wheelchair. So if you're pumping away at a constant hand speed, right, you can, if you grab up near the lever, you're going to swing through a relatively small angle versus down near the bottom where it's a bigger angle. So you can get higher angular velocity here and lower but higher torque there. So your chair speed is just inversely proportional to your lever length where you grab. So super, super simple system. And these other variables are the diameter of the chain ring, which is the big gear, the radius of the wheel, and the diameter of the free wheel, which is the little ratchet gear on the wheel. So what's nice about this architecture is that we made the person the most complex part of the machine. Right? The person was the part of the machine that could change its geometry in order to change mechanical advantage. And people are really good at that. Like, you can think about the path planning you can do with your hands. It's unbelievable. So the machine itself could be a very simple assembly of single-speed bike parts that we could source anywhere. The second is that this architecture gave us a really high range of mechanical advantage. So we get a 3-to-1 change, and that means this lever length effectively is 1/3 that lever length. And to put that in perspective, the best mountain bike parts you can buy will give you about a 6-to-1 change in mechanical advantage, but they cost over $2,000 per set. Right? This costs $20 for all the parts in the chair. It's actually less than that now because we get it at volume. But we were able to get very high performance comparatively for really, really low cost and really nice simplicity. And then the final point was that we could package this system on a conventional wheelchair architecture, which is important as far as supporting a person so they don't slouch and like crush their lungs. And we could provide real cushioning so they don't develop pressure sores, which is a big problem with wheelchairs. The same as like bed sores that the elderly get when they don't move and they lose blood circulation on a loaded area of their body. So, I worked out this analysis. This is kind of what we did for the ideas competition. We did some, first order calculations where, you can just do, this is just like our toolbox, the other week doing power conservation, right? The power output of the person is going to be consumed by air drag, rolling resistance, and if you're going up a hill, the power required to climb, so that's just your velocity times the sum of these forces, and you work out your air drag, and then your rolling resistance and your climbing resistance, right? So we can look at that power required versus the power a person can actually output, which is about 20 watts with their arms for long durations. Turns out there's actually a study on this. It really helped us. But people